Ever feel like you're kind of stuck on a treadmill, working harder and harder, but just not really getting anywhere financially?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going deep on Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Right.
It's a book that always seems to get people fired up, get strong opinions.
Yeah.
But whether you love it or absolutely hate it, it definitely forces you to rethink your relationship with money.
Absolutely.
So we're going to dig into some of Kiyosaki's biggest ideas today with expert speaker.
Okay.
We'll unpack why that house you're working towards might not actually be an asset,
Interesting.
how to escape the rat race, and the importance of what Kiyosaki calls financial intelligence.
Right.
Ready to shake up some of those old ideas about money and maybe have a few aha moments along the way?
Let's do it.
Let's dive in.
One of the things from Rich Dad, Poor Dad that really gets you thinking is how Kiyosaki redefines what an asset and a liability actually are.
Okay.
He doesn't just look at what you own, but what your money is doing.
So it's not just about having a big house or a fancy car. It's about whether those things are actually working for you or maybe even working against you.
Exactly. Kiyosaki says a true asset is something that puts money in your pocket,
Okay.
whereas a liability is something that takes money out.
Okay.
And this is where his whole argument about a house comes in. He actually says that for most people, their house is a liability, even though we're always told it's our biggest asset.
Yeah, I can see how some people might be shaking their heads right now,
Right.
saying, hold on, my mortgage payment, that's an investment in my future. But what Kiyosaki's really talking about here is cash flow.
Yeah. He's saying that every single month you're putting money into this house, your mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and don't even get me started on repairs.
Oh, yeah.
All of that without necessarily getting any cash flow back in return.
Yeah, it can feel like a bottomless pit sometimes, especially when something breaks and you weren't planning for it.
Exactly. And that's what he's getting at.
Okay.
Now, this doesn't mean that owning a home is always a bad thing.
Right.
But Kiyosaki wants us to really think about the real cost
Okay.
and maybe if that money could be doing more for us somewhere else.
So how does this all tie into Kiyosaki's idea of the rat race?
So this is where things get kind of interesting, right?
Okay.
Kiyosaki says most people get trapped in this cycle of working really hard, getting a raise, and then they just kind of upgrade their lifestyle. They get a bigger house, a nicer car, maybe some fancier vacations.
Right.
So their expenses just keep going up with their income, and they never really get ahead.
Yeah, it's like they're on this endless treadmill, right? Working harder, but not building any real wealth.
Yeah,
They're trading time for money, but then that money just disappears as quickly as it comes in.
exactly.
Right.
And that is why Kiyosaki talks about the importance of having your money work for you.
Okay.
Instead of just trading your hours for a paycheck, he wants you to build assets that can create passive income.
Even while you sleep.
Exactly.
Now that sounds like a dream come true. But what are some examples of these magical assets?
Well, Kiyosaki talks about businesses, investing in real estate, and even something as simple as that comic book library that he and his friend Mike started when they were kids.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah,
It really shows how even kids can wrap their heads around these ideas,
Yeah.
They took their free time at the convenience store, saw an opportunity, and created this little business for themselves.
yeah,
They weren't relying on allowances. They were creating their own cash flow.
exactly. It's about shifting your mindset from being dependent on that paycheck
Yeah.
to creating systems that can generate income.
Even in small ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where financial intelligence comes in, right?
Right.
It's not enough to just have money. You have to know how to make it work for you.
Absolutely. Kiyosaki's a huge believer in always learning and expanding your financial knowledge. He says that this financial IQ, it's like what really separates the rich from the middle class.
Okay, so it's like going to the gym, but for your brain.
Right.
The more you work that financial intelligence muscle, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
But how do you actually build that financial intelligence?
Yeah.
What does Kiyosaki actually say to do?
Well, he talks about reading books, going to seminars. He even made this board game called the Rich Dad Game
Okay.
to try to help people learn about investing and managing their money,
Yeah.
in a fun
A
way.
board game about money.
Yeah,
I kind of want to check that out. That's interesting.
it's pretty cool.
But besides games and books and stuff, he also talks about the psychology of money too, right? I mean, we all know that fear and being greedy can really mess you up when it comes to money.
For sure. Absolutely.
Mm.
Kiyosaki, he says that most people are driven by fear when it comes to money.
Okay.
and that fear can keep them stuck in that rat race that we were talking about.
Okay.
He tells a good story about this lady, Mrs. Martin. She ran a store in his neighborhood when he was a kid.
Okay, what happened? I don't think I know this one.
So Kiyosaki and his friend Mike, they wanted to make some extra cash, right?
Yeah.
So they asked Mrs. Martin if they could work for her.
Okay.
And she said, okay, I'll pay you 10 cents an hour.
10 cents an hour. That's almost nothing.
Yeah, it's basically nothing. But here's the thing. Kiyosaki realized that she was using their fear of not having any money against them.
What?
They were just so ready to earn something, they took a really bad deal.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It shows how fear can make you like not think straight and just settle for way less than you should.
Absolutely. And how easy it is to get stuck thinking just about right now and not about the future.
Right.
Kiyosaki says that this same fear, this is what keeps people in jobs they don't even like or from going after their dreams.
Yeah, it's that fear of what you don't know, fear of messing up, fear of not having enough.
Yeah,
It's easy to let that like take over, you know.
it is.
But Kiyosaki, he also says that the usual advice of go to school, get a good job, and save money is not the answer, right?
Yeah, he's not a fan of that advice. He thinks that way of thinking can lead to, like, working your whole life for someone else's dream.
Mm-hmm.
Always trading your time for money.
Yeah.
And never really getting to that financial freedom.
It's like you're never really in control.
Exactly.
He has that, what's that analogy he uses? The Leaning Tower of Suburbia.
Oh, yeah.
It's like how people think they're moving up by getting a bigger house, a nicer car.
Right.
But they're actually just getting deeper and deeper into debt.
Yeah, it's like building a house of cards.
Yes, sir.
It looks good on the outside, but it could all fall apart.
Exactly.
And that kind of brings us to another big idea in the book.
Okay.
It's not about how much money you make. It's about building up your assets.
Okay, so it's not about your income. It's about what you own that's making more income. So that's where things like starting businesses, real estate, even like stocks and bonds come in.
Yeah, those are all good examples. Kiyosaki wants us to see every dollar we have as this little worker,
Okay.
working all the time to make more money,
Right.
even when we're sleeping or on vacation or whatever.
It's like having a team of tiny little money-making machines.
Right.
But he also talks about how important it is to understand how money actually works,
Yes,
especially when it comes to taxes.
absolutely. He argues that rich people, they don't just work hard for their money, they know how to protect it.
Okay.
And they know how to make it grow even more by, like, using tax system, legally.
Okay.
He talks about corporations and how you can use those to pay less in taxes.
Okay. Now that part can be a little confusing if you're not an accountant or something.
Yeah, it can be.
Can you give us like a simple example of what he means?
Sure. So let's say you have a home office for your business.
Okay.
If you know what you're doing, you can actually write off a bunch of your expenses on your taxes, like part of your rent or your mortgage interest,
Okay.
utilities, even your internet bill, because it's for your business.
So it's not about breaking the rules. It's about actually knowing the rules of the game and using them like in a smart way.
Right, exactly.
Like knowing what you can write off on your taxes instead of just taking the standard deduction that everyone else does.
Exactly. Kiyosaki says that not knowing this stuff about taxes can really cost you a lot of money in the long run.
Right. So it's like financial intelligence isn't just about investing. It's about this whole world of money.
Yes.
Taxes are a big part of it. It's about taking charge of your money instead of just like hoping for the best.
Exactly. And it all goes back to what we were saying about learning and finding mentors, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And always trying to, like, grow your financial knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. It's like leveling up your money smarts so you can, play the game like a pro, not just like watching from the sidelines wishing you could get in the game.
Exactly.
The Kiyosaki also talks about mindset, right?
Yeah, big time.
It's not just about like knowing stuff. It's about, actually having the guts to use it.
Yeah, he's a big believer in, like, getting over your fear and taking risks.
Okay.
Calculated risks, of course.
Right.
He even says failure, it actually inspires winners, which I think is an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, it's more like I might fail, but I'm not going to quit.
Exactly.
It's like that, what's that quote? The biggest risk you can take is not taking any risks at all. Something like that.
Yeah, I like that.
But Kiyosaki, he doesn't just talk the talk. He tells a lot of stories about his own, like, investments that went well.
Right.
And ones that didn't really work out.
Yeah, he's really open about his failures, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
He talks about buying and selling properties, starting businesses, making investments, and sometimes things just flopped.
Right.
But he used all of that to, like, figure out what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, it's like they say experience is the best teacher.
Right.
But sometimes it gives you a really hard lesson.
Exactly.
But he also says we don't have to figure this all out by ourselves, right?
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
He's a big, big fan of finding mentors, people who've already done what you want to do. He talks about, like, taking people to lunch,
Okay.
just asking them for advice.
Right.
He's even willing to pay for good advice. He says, always pay your brokers well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Surrounding yourself with people who know their stuff, it's so valuable.
Yeah, it's like realizing that everyone you meet, they've got something to teach you.
Exactly.
But his whole philosophy, it's not just about making a ton of money for yourself, is it?
No, not at all. He talks about giving back, too.
Absolutely.
He thinks that being generous is a big part of the equation,
Oh, yeah.
giving money, but also sharing what you've learned to help other people be financially free.
So it's not just about how much you can get, it's about how much you can, like, give back and make a difference.
Exactly. It's about expanding your definition of, like, what it means to be successful beyond just money.
Yeah, I like that. So we've talked about a lot today as we're wrapping up our deep dive on Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What's like the main thing you hope people take away from this?
I think the biggest thing is that, like, financial freedom, it's not this finish line you cross.
Okay.
It's more like this journey you're always on. You're always learning. You're always questioning what you think you know. It's about being in control of your money future.
It's like changing that voice in your head from, I can't afford that, to how can I make that happen?
Exactly. It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Yeah.
Creating a life of abundance, and not just for you, but for others too.
Like that.
And, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's not about some magic formula to get rich quickly. It's really like a wake-up call. It's about learning how money works, making smart decisions, and building a life where you're financially free to do what you want.
It's like realizing you have more power than you think you do.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Remember, knowledge is power, and when it comes to your money, the more you know, the more control you have over your future. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.